Well, who remembers where we left off last week? Don't be shy now.
Did we stop at?
No, we went just past you. We stopped at Zebulun last week as we began to look at these different prophecies concerning Jacob's sons. We saw how first he took Joseph's two sons as his own, blessed them as if they were his own sons, preferring Joseph's sons as giving them the position of double portion that Reuben had lost. We spoke about how Reuben had lost this double portion. We also see something that didn't get brought out so much last week, that Reuben's position both as leader of the family after his father passed, and his position as the spiritual leader of the family, both got distributed between his brothers as well. We find that Judah, in being the kingly line, the brother which the kingly line came out of, took up the mantle of being the leader for his family, while Levi would take up the mantle of that spiritual leadership. It was customary for the father to be the one who would be the spiritual guide, as well as just the ruler over his family. We see that all throughout the Old Testament, really until Israel is brought out of Egypt and the law is put in place, where the eldest male of the family, usually the father, the oldest brother, would bring the sacrifices on behalf of the family. We get a taste of this over in Job. We looked at Simeon and Levi, how they were divided. They were scattered throughout the land of Israel. We talked about how Simeon really was a tribe that was just dissolved within Judah. His portion was down here, just kind of a ball in the middle of the land that Judah had inherited after they came into the promised land, and they were very quickly dispersed. We also see this as they were entering into the Holy Land. I believe it's Numbers gives us the account that they had lost some 60% of their population while they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Right? They left Egypt in Exodus as I believe the third largest tribe, and by the time they had made it into the promised land, they had shrunk drastically. We also find that Levi was scattered in sort of a different way. He was scattered toward the what's the word I want? With the blessing of his brethren, in being that priestly tribe. I believe it was Sierra that had pointed out later that evening that it ties back to their obedience there at the base of Mount Sinai in the golden calf incident. Their willingness to go out and to slay their brethren who were worshiping this golden calf. They were blessed in this, and they were allowed to bless the rest of their brethren there in Israel. I mentioned last time that as we got into Zebulun, we would spend a few minutes talking about the prophecy that Jacob had given over to him. It is the one prophecy over these brothers, over these tribes, which we have not seen a fulfillment of yet. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. But let's pick up here Genesis chapter 49 and verse 13, coming just after Judah. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Issachar is is a strong ass crouching down between two burdens. And he saw that the rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. Now I don't have Issachar in my notes. Oh yes, I do. He's there. Okay, never mind. Scratch that. We'll move on to Issachar. I thought that I skipped over him entirely. Went from Zebulun to Dan. Let's talk about Zebulun for a minute. So here we find that this prophetic telling that they would be dwelling in the haven of the sea, that their territory would extend up to Zidon or Sidon up here in Phoenicia. If you recall from our study in Amos a few weeks ago, we talked about how Tyre, being the capital of Phoenicia, really received a lot of focus throughout the prophets, God judging them for their wickedness and such. But Sidon was a sister city to Tyre. They were very powerful together. They would almost trade off being the capital of this area because of their access to the sea, because of the wealth that would come in from the trade there from all around all the nations that were around there, right? They're a major trading area. This was supposed to be a territory that Zebulun would have inherited. We find in the distribution of the tribes that Asher ended up gaining this strip of land right in here along the coastline, while Zebulun inherited back in a little ways. He's about 10-15 miles from the coast, inherited some land in here, still between the Sea of Galilee and the Great Sea, I believe that's the Mediterranean. Still right in there, right? We find a partial fulfillment there, but they never did conquer up into this area. They never did inherit into this area. And it's here that we find prophecy that will be fulfilled, or is yet to be fulfilled, in at least the millennial reign of Christ and into eternity. The reasons why they didn't come up in here, there's probably a lot of different reasons, right? These were powerful people up in here. It didn't take very long after Israel came into the land, after Joshua died, for them to really lose steam. God had promised them that if they continued to be faithful, they continued to push on, that eventually as they grew, He would conquer their enemies for them. He would expand their borders, going up to the north, going up to the Euphrates River, out this way and such, but they never really pushed on to do that. So Jacob's blessing to Zebulun, although it implies a destiny of dwelling in this land here, we don't see that fulfilled quite yet. It didn't materialize while they were going into the land there. Moving on to Issachar, we find that Issachar is described as being a strong donkey, that his resting place was good. He bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant at forced labor. So we see this picture of a beast of burden of a donkey, right? And we know that donkeys are strong animals. They're good for packing. They're good for just hauling and bearing burdens. Maybe not as strong as an ox, but certainly stronger than someone like me, right? You can load up a donkey with a whole lot more than I could ever carry. And so we see it as this very endurant creature, something that is able to bear these burdens for a long ways. And we see that here in the text that he's he's burdened, and then he finds the place where he's at that there's good rest, and it really implies that he went from bearing these burdens, from being this strong animal, to just laying down, to almost getting lazy in a way, and because of this, becoming a servant to those around him that would put other burdens onto him, rather than bearing his own burdens, rather than bearing the burdens of his brethren. He was instead forced to bear burdens of others, and we see this being played out as various peoples would come in. Issachar was a very large tribe, and oftentimes they would be raided. They would be what's the word I want? My brain isn't running nearly as quickly as I would hope. They were forced into being servants for various other peoples. Sierra?
You said Issachar was a large tribe, but their land was pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just like in size they were large?
Yeah, in size they were fairly large. Their tribes settled in very fertile land, and so they were very well off in their area. And they were able to grow numerically in that place, but they were also made to serve. Right? And they're also noted for wisdom in First Chronicles 12, but they aren't noted for dominance. They aren't noted for being a tribe that was ferocious or really had a spine to stand up for themselves and different things. Were there any other comments or questions before we continue on? You have a map of the distribution of the tribes, huh? That's really handy. I wish I had one of those. Alright, let's move on to Dan. Verse 16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, and an adder in the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider will fall backward. And then Jacob takes a moment to say, I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. So, verse 16, who here might have a guess as to what Jacob meant by that? What are some notable ways that we could have seen that prophecy being fulfilled? Are there any famous biblical characters that are from the tribe of Dan?
Is he a judge? Or she a judge?
Perhaps. Just a second here. We all are thinking. Double check something.
The greatest judge I know in the Bible is Solomon. I don't
Yeah.
know. Is that
Solomon was out of the
David?
tribe of Judah.
Judah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know my lineages very well.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Judges chapter 13, verse 2. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. Who remembers who Manoah's son was? I guess after we finish the Hebrews, we're going to have to study the Judges.
I guess so.
Samson.
Oh.
Yeah. There were a couple other judges, if I remember correctly. that also came out of Dan. But notably, Samson was one of the judges that came out of the tribe of Dan. And during the time of the judges, those men, those people stood as God's what's the word I want? Ambassadors, I suppose. They're in the nation of Israel, right? They judged over Israel. They told them the will of the Lord. They fought battles on behalf of Israel. One of the reasons why Samson is as famous as he is because the victories that he had, that he was given over the Philistine people there, as he was going in and fighting on behalf of Israel. And so we find that this first part, Dan will judge his people, really being fulfilled in that lineage of judges which came out of Dan. But then that's followed up with, he's also an adder. He's also a serpent who will strike the heels of a horse as it walks by. There are a couple of different takes on what this might mean. But with the serpent imagery suggesting cunning or treachery, really I think we can rest on this pointing toward the idolatry that would come out of the tribe of Dan, that would come out of that area and such. Dan being, or Laish, being one of the places where the golden calves were set up under Jeroboam, meaning Dan and Bethel on both sides of the territory of Israel there. We find that Dan got his name over in Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 through 6. It reads, "When Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who has withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold, my maid is Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. She gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and has given me a son. And therefore she called his name Dan." And we find in Judges chapter 18, verse 29 through 31, "And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at first. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up, Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh." We find the way that he got his name. We also find that this idolatry was not just a issue that started in the time of the kings. It started long before that, as his tribe gave themselves over to idolatry. So that's a little bit on Dan there, how it was fulfilled. We do find that this legacy being linked by some for Dan's exclusion in Revelation 7's tribal list, as it lists out the tribes and the 12,000 from each being preserved. Before we move on, are there any questions or comments?
When you say moving on, are you going to cover verse 18 or are you going to skip over verse 16?
Of which? Of what? Oh. I've waited for thy salvation, O Lord. That's a very good question. I think we'll just skip it. We'll leave that one as a ponderer. Let's move on to Gad. Unless you had some thoughts on it. Did you have some thoughts on it? No? Okay. Let's move on to verse 19. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Gad, with his tribal lands being to the east of Jordan, in this area where he was being attacked by Moab, by Ammon, even by the Edomites as they would occasionally come up north on the east side of the Jordan. His land was often attacked. Well, we find that Gad was victorious at the last. That, despite losing a lot of territory, Gad did hold on, was allowed to hold on for a very long time in this area, and he was allowed to persist, right? With these tribes settling here on the east side of Jordan, it'd be very easy for the enemies of Israel to simply come in, to conquer them, to just make them, push them back into the rest of Israel and make them absorb or dissolve into the rest of Israel, like kind of like Simeon did with Judah. But God allowed them to persist as their own tribe and really gave them victory in that. Let's see here. Asher. Verse 20. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. We find that Asher's land being up here by Tyre, being along this coast, they had a fairly small area of inheritance up here. They never did push up north very far or anything like that, but because of their location, they were very fruitful. They were wealthy. This prophecy of Jacob's denoting that they would not only have the necessities for life, but they would venture into luxury. Right? That they would have enough wealth that they could really enjoy a lot of luxurious royal delicacies, as the scriptures put it. Naphtali, verse 21. Naphtali is a hind let loose, and gives goodly words. This here in our King James is maybe a little bit of a rougher translation to try and understand. Other translations put it that Naphtali is a doe or a deer let loose and gives goodly or beautiful fawns. I can't remember what translation it is that gives us that particular wording, but really giving this idea of a tribe that has freedom and that is fruitful in its reproduction, right? That it's really a thing that produces beauty. We find that this territory that they were given is very scenic, very free-spirited, and we might even find that it ties back to Barak's victory song over in Judges chapter 5. And I'll let you read that on your own time, and see if you can find that connection there. But we also find that the tribe lacked dominance, and we find that it really fit the gentler image of a deer. It didn't have the production of warriors, of kings or judges like other tribes did, but they were certainly there, and they were what's the word I want? They were still fruitful in their own right? They still produced good things. Good things still came of them. Let's continue on here, verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. And thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, blessings thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, and to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. We find here really a very beautiful blessing that Jacob has for his son. Despite the fact that prophetically the prophecies would go through Ephraim and Manasseh, as we discussed last time, we find that Jacob acknowledges both Joseph's steadfastness in spite of being hated by his brothers. We find that Jacob acknowledges Joseph's relationship with God that he had while he was there in Israel, acknowledging how God helped him and really made him to prosper as he went from being a slave to second in command over the whole nation. We also find that Jacob here lists a few different names of God, right? He has come to the point in his life where he is referring to God by these different titles, like the shepherd and the stone of Israel, the mighty God of Jacob, really looking to God as provider for himself and for his family, as the rock which his family would be built upon, as the shepherd which would lead them in the land where they were strangers. Finally, we find Benjamin here in verse 27. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey. At night he will divide the spoil. And we find here that Benjamin really is described as a violent or ravenous tribe, devouring prey, dividing the spoil. And we find this being fulfilled in their production of some very fierce warriors. We read about this man Ehud in Judges chapter 3. We see that Saul, there in 1 Samuel, is out of the tribe of Benjamin. We think about the military might, the military mind of Saul as he became king and really began to fight the nations surrounding Israel. We find that David's army was also comprised of a large regiment of people out of the tribe of Benjamin, men out of the tribe of Benjamin. If I remember correctly, there was also something remarkable about these Benjamite warriors. Does anybody remember what that was? I'm going to turn over to 1 Chronicles chapter 12 real quick just to double check, but I think there are two things that I find were remarkable about the Benjamites, if I'm not completely misremembering. it here. Let's see where the Benjamites you described.
In chapter 12?
Yes.
Verse 2 talks about them using red and left hand.
Yeah. Armed with bows, ambidextrous both in the hurling of stones and in shooting arrows. They were slingers, renowned slingers. They were also renowned archers there for the nation of Israel, having really a talent for this warfare. Having dabbled myself both in slinging stones and shooting arrows, I can tell you it's hard enough to do with your dominant hand, let alone with both. But we find that the Benjamites were renowned in the army for being able to do this proficiently with both hands, really fulfilling this prophecy. But before we close for this evening, let's turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 33. The rest of chapter 49, Jacob has a few other words to say, and we find that he dies. We find that he's brought back into the land and buried. And then Genesis, of course, ends with chapter 50. But over in Deuteronomy chapter 33, just as we find that this blessing of Jacob really closed out the book of Genesis for us, we find that a blessing of Moses over the tribes of Israel closes out the Torah here, the first 5 books of the Bible. And as Israel is about ready to go into the land, Moses blesses the tribes of Israel. And we might not dwell on it much this evening, but just in your own minds, I want you to see what connections you can draw between the prophecies and the blessings of Jacob over his sons, and the prophecies and blessings of Moses over these tribes. So we'll begin in verse 1 here, and we'll just keep on reading. And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, the Lord came from Sinai, and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people, all his saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet, every one shall receive of thy words. Moses commanded us a law, even an inheritance for the congregation of Jacob. And he was king in Jeshurun, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. Let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. And this is the blessing of Judah. And he said, hear, Lord, the voice of Judah, and bring him unto his people, and let his hands be sufficient for him, and be thou a help to him from his enemies. And of Levi he said, let thy Thummim and thy Urim be with the Holy One, whom thou didst prove at Massah, and with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he acknowledge his brethren, nor knew his own children, for they have observed thy word and kept thy covenant. They shall teach Jacob thy judgments, and Israel thy law, and they shall put incense before thee, and whole burnt sacrifice upon thine altar. Bless, Lord, his substance, and accept the work of his hands. Smite through the loins of them that rise up against him, and of them that hate him, and they that rise not again. And of Benjamin he said, the Beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him, and the Lord shall cover him all the day long, and he shall dwell between the shoulders. And of Joseph he said, Blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, for the deep that coucheth beneath, and for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of ancient mountains, and for precious things of lasting hills, and for the precious things of the earth, the fullness thereof, for the good will of him that dwelt in the bush. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them shall he push the people together to the ends of the earth, they that are in 10,000s of Ephraim, and they that are the thousands of Manasseh. And of Zebulun he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, for in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. And they shall call the people into the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall suck the abundance of the seas and the treasures hid in the sand. And of Gad he said, Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. He dwelleth as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. And he provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated, and he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord, and his judgments with Israel. And of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp, he shall leap from Bashan. And of Naphtali he said, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full with the blessing of the Lord, possess thou the west and the south. And of Asher he said, Let Asher be blessed with children, let him be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. Thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and his excellency on the sky. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, Destroy them. Israel then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon a land of corn and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down dew. Happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people saved by the Lord, the shield of thy help, and who is the sword of thy excellency. Thine enemies shall be found liars unto thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. We find here many different differences between what Moses gave in blessing over these tribes, and what Jacob gave as blessing over his sons. But one thing that we do find that each of these blessings have in common is that they are pointing to God as being the strength in which they will see these things fulfilled. One thing that does stand out at the very end of the chapter here is how Moses describes God. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rides upon the heaven in your help, and in his excellency on the sky. We've talked about this before. As the Israelites would go into the land of Israel, one of the chief demons of the land was the storm rider, the god which rode on the clouds. And we find that God, throughout Exodus, into Deuteronomy, as he describes himself, as he leads Israel into the land, he declares his supremacy. He declares his power over all these other gods that were worshipped in the land. He is the one that rides on the clouds. He is the one who wields lightning, who destroys the enemies of his people. We find that Israel, while they were both blessed and rebuked by their fathers, they were as sons, we find that as they come into the land, Moses' blessings over them takes a much more positive note, really encouraging them into going in and taking in the land. And it's from this that we draw our application for this evening. We find ourselves often caught up in sins of the past. We find ourselves often prevented in our own minds by our faults and our failures. But when we look at what it is that God has promised us, when we look at what it is that God will accomplish by His people, we see that it is His grace, it is His mercy, it is His power that overcomes these things. We know that we cannot do it alone. We know that as humans we fail. We have many faults. If you want to know mine, just ask my wife or my mother. Both will be able to tell you plenty. But we find that when we put ourselves into the hands of the Lord, He can take even these faults and even these failures and turn them to His glory, just as He did with these different tribes, just as He did with these sons of Jacob. I hope that these things have been educational. I hope they've been not too boring for you all. Before we dismiss, were there any questions or comments? We probably could have covered all the brothers in 1 week, but I'm glad we spread it out into 2. Thank you for your time, for your attention. Let's go ahead and stand together.